Hey guys, good to see y'all. We've been on for a few minutes already, just kind of talking, and y'all are very, very busy men. So I appreciate your time today for about an hour or so talking about the auction industry and ways we can make it better by being better auctioneers in whatever capacity we're in. So I'm joined today by Tom Riles and Jeff Stansberry, two men who I've come to love and get to work with on a regular basis with Tristar. And spoiler alert, in the near future, Lord willing, I want to have Daniel and Nicole on as well to talk about Tristar. So I talk about Tristar a lot. It's made a special impact in my life, as I know it has in y'all's as well. So, Tom, I want to start with you. Tell me a little bit about what life is like for you now. You've got something big coming up in the near future. And if you're willing to share that, we'd love to hear about it. And just kind of give us a day in the life of Tom Riles for a minute.
For sure. Yeah. Thanks, Joshua, for having me. And hey, Jeff, nice to see you.
Good morning, Tom.
Good. Life is good. Yeah. My background is a little different than probably a lot of the folks in the auction industry. So my background is in entertainment, where I was the opening act for a whole bunch of TV shows out in Los Angeles for many years. And the longest running one I did was the Ellen DeGeneres show. And I was the hype man, went out before the show each and every day for 17 years and pumped up the crowd and engaged with the crowd. Probably the thing I learned doing that translates the most to auctioneering would be it's a very egoless position. And I think a lot of times that might help you in the auction world. If I had an ego at Ellen, I would have been gone within a year because her name was on the wall. It's her show. And I'm just lucky to be a part of that thing along for the journey. And a great journey it was. And along the way, we had 3 kids. And we moved to Nashville in 2022, about when that show was wrapping up. But the exciting news is Ellen's doing one final stand-up tour, kind of as a exclamation point to her career. And she asked me to go along with her. So this summer, I'll be traveling to about 20 different cities with her and opening up for her, which is it's a big thing. We're going to be at the Ryman in Nashville. We'll be at Radio City Music Hall in New York City. So it's going to be a pretty amazing journey. And I'm excited about it. And it'll be cool I've been so locked in on the benefit auctions, which is really my specialty in the auctioneering world. But it's kind of cool to go back to what I was doing for a little bit for a couple months when the benefit auction season is quiet. So yeah, that's so much more to say, but I don't want to take all the time, but that's kind of my background, and happy to be chatting with you all today.
Awesome. Well, we're proud of you and thankful for your opportunities, and we're going to miss you on the 19th, but we're excited for you. Jeff, why don't you tell us about a day in the life of Jeff Stansberry? I know you're headed to Atlanta today, you said. So tell us a little bit about what's going on with you.
I am going to Atlanta today for an auction.com sale tomorrow. They do most people would know them probably as courthouse step assets, where it's part of the foreclosure process of trustee states. And so typically we'll have maybe about 30 assets or so that we'll start with. We'll probably wind up with about 10 or so tomorrow. And then lifetime this time of year is a little bit, well, actually in May it wasn't too busy, but it's about to get cranked up here. Next week I'll have 2 or 3 different equipment auctions, and then we'll be in Ocala, Florida for Ocala breeder sale, thoroughbred sale. So lots of different things going on right now,
Yeah, absolutely. That's great. Tom, I want to go back to you for a minute. Because your role in the auction industry, to me, how I know you, is relatively different than what most other auctioneers are. Like we had the last podcast, we had Kenneth Wilcox on, who is a world champion livestock auctioneer, and he sells at like 3 different barns every week, and great guy, and love him to death. But I look at your career in the auction industry. You do benefit auctions predominantly. We had Bobby Ehlert on about a year ago talking about benefit auctions. But when I think of my relationship with you, it's as a narrator, right? So you're the one who reads off the items, and you with TriStar, it's so different because we're selling to 3 TV screens, right? We've got live bidders, it's simulcast, but we can't see them. And I think having a background in TV and theater comes in handy doing that because you have to keep your audience engaged. And so, how would you describe the responsibilities of a narrator, and how do you think the narrator and the auctioneer should play off of one another, and the role that goes? And I'll ask Jeff the same question in just a minute, so we'll see how well y'all's answers match up.
That's right. You can let him answer first, and then I'll just, as my job is to just kind of
Sure.
go with whatever the auctioneer says. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. Well, first off, I'll say I like just sitting next to both of you guys and listening and learning from you both, and watching you and learning what's happening on the screens, because I have so much to learn. So I enjoy that part of it greatly. As for my actual role, I think it's certainly you want to bring excitement. Man, some of those days are longer now than when we first started doing it. So suddenly it's 6 hours later, 7 hours later, and we're still on the live stream. So still maintaining a level of energy. Nicole reminds me to smile. So I want to keep smiling. I'll tell you, after the last sale, I was stuck like this, smiling for about, I think, a day or two. So just kind of remembering to smile and not get in the way too much. Again, it's like I'm in a supplemental role there. So whatever I can do to best assist you guys to set it up, like I used to do for Ellen, set it up for the auctioneer so they can roll with it. And then when you need me to jump back in, I'm always right there and ready. So I hope that answers your question to a degree.
Yeah, absolutely. Jeff, what do you think?
About Tom's role or my role?
Well, both. How you work together in both of those roles, and how you like to play off of one another.
It's number one, Tom is a great guy to work with because we take little jabs at one another and this and that, and he understands that it's all in jest that we do that. It's part of being engaging with one another, but there are times when something may be going on behind the scenes that people don't know. Maybe there's some kind of technical difficulty or something like that. So if the announcer is there to take up that dead space time, it's really valuable, because especially in the TriStar setting, I refer to it as the QVC, or the Home Shopping Network version of auctions, which is really exciting. But there's I remember the first time that I did a live auction that did not have, and it was a livestock auction, and it didn't have the cattle coming into the ring. So many small things that we take for granted at an auction, the livestock, the cow when she's coming into the ring, the movement of that animal coming into the ring, especially up on the front end. There's a lot of anticipation with that and excitement that's built there. So even the gates clanging and all the small things, and the guy that's in the ring bringing them in and all that, when those parts are gone, especially if you're not used to it, it really can throw you off. So even on our end, dead time, dead air can be a killer for momentum. And so it's our job and especially the job of someone like Tom, who's so good at it, to keep everybody engaged in between the items, in between the auctioneering and the selling of assets from one to the other.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's, I was just going to say, and it's, back to us kind of joking with each other a little bit. It's clear when there's time for that, and it's clear when there's not time for that. That's clear to me, at least, because sometimes, man, we're locked in, and you gotta sell 10 things in the next 2 minutes, otherwise we're falling behind. But other times I do appreciate, Jeff, and I've started to do this in a benefit world. You'll start cracking jokes while you're ramping up the actual bidding, right? So you'll start your chant, and then you're inserting joke, 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 chant, chant, joke, 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 and then you kind of keep going from there. So I appreciate the way that you handle humor, seamlessly, just kind of flowing right with what you do there.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a fun time to work with both of you guys because y'all are so, to me at least, even in the thick of things, y'all are both so relaxed and easygoing, and you wear the smiles. And yeah, Tom, I'm the same way. I looked at our live stream that they put on Facebook, and I'll just admit my sins to the church. I looked like I wanted to kill somebody. Like I was just stone cold. And I was like, okay, I got to smile more. But with you guys, it's easy to smile. Y'all make it fun and enjoyable. Okay, I want to go back to sort of your origin stories. I want to know how you got started in the auction business. So for Tom, like knowing your background in television, transitioning into auction, or did auction come first or whatever? And then for Jeff, Jeff, people know your name already, whether they know they do or not, because my dad was on our podcast and he talked about you and y'all being fraternity brothers, and knowing you going to auction school and getting licensed and doing livestock sales. And that had a big impact on my dad getting his auction license. So I want to hear your origin stories, how you got in the business, and what kind of prompted you to do that. So Jeff, we'll start with you on that.
Well, I grew up in the country in a little town called Rutledge, Granger County. If you've ever heard of Granger County tomatoes, probably 2/3 of those tomatoes are produced by people I'm related to. So we were always going to auctions. I never can remember actually not going to auctions. I passed by an old house here a couple of weeks ago when I was back home, and my mind flashed back to the day that I was up there with my dad, and it was in the summertime, and maybe I was 4, and it was so hot that we stayed there all day long. We were always at a farm auction on the weekends, and my dad was in construction business, so especially in the winter months, he would have times where he was rained out. And if it was on a Tuesday or a Wednesday, we would be going to either the Morristown Livestock Auction or the Knoxville Livestock Auction. And on Saturdays, there were a couple. One was in Newport and the other was in Greenville. And the first guy that I tried to mimic was a guy named Red, who was an auctioneer at Newport Livestock Market. And looking back on it now, he wasn't very good, but to me at that time, I was just enamored with what he did. So the first live auction that I did, I was about 14 years old. And my county agent took me to the Granger County Poultry Show, and we set the pens and everything up. And it got time to sell the chickens, and I was just standing there. And he said, "This is Jeff, and he's going to sell the chickens to you." So, so for I got my practice on my quarters for sure at 2 1/4, 2 1/2, and 75, and all that. So, and I played around a little bit with it here and there, but fast forward to the time that I knew your dad, I was around your dad, it would have been 1987. I had transferred to UT because I wanted to be on the livestock judging team there. And I was a year away from graduating from UT. And I was an animal science major. And my dad had begged me to major business. I said, no, I'm going to be a cowboy the rest of my life. And so I got to looking at some of the jobs that some of the guys that were graduating were getting. And I thought, I don't know if I want to do that the rest of my life. And I was flipping through a magazine, and there was an ad for a Missouri auction school that was in the back. And I remember my granddad saying, auctioneers make a lot of money. And I said, Okay, that's what pushed me over the edge. So I called Missouri Auction School, and a week later, which would actually be 37 years from this coming Sunday, I drove to Missouri in a red S10 pickup truck with no air conditioning and vinyl seats. And it was about 100 degrees. And I pulled into the Americana Hotel, and there wasn't a dry thread on me. I mean, I was drenched. It was like 100 degrees the whole trip. So I graduated the next year, and then moved to Arkansas and worked for a cattle ranch. And after some near-death experiences, I said, I think I'm going to move back and try to make this auction thing go. So that's kind of how it started for me. And I've met so many good people that have been critical in what I've done. I mean, it's been the difference between having a successful career and then having a hobby, basically. So, in my opinion, you can't get anywhere in the auction business on the business side on your own. You have to have some help. And I've had a lot of help. I've had a lot of people who have been really good to me.
Yep. Very good. Tom, how'd you get involved in the auction business?
So my first auction that I ever attended was probably not until the age of 30. So I'm a little different than I think a lot of folks in this industry. That was a benefit auction. And how I got there was I was working at Ellen, and we had our first child. Not Ellen and I, my wife and I had our first child. And her name is Barbara, and she was born with a heart defect, and she had a really scary start, and she had open heart surgery right after birth. And she's healthy now and wonderful. But Ellen featured us on the show, and my wife and I went on with our daughter and told her heart story. And after that appearance, and this was the top show on TV at the time, American Heart Association reached out and asked me to start emceeing some of their big heart balls around the country. They do a big gala in each city. And I started flying, every few weekends or so. We could do one of those on a volunteer basis because I was just happy to be in the room with, man, the most influential people in each city, right? I'm in Boston, and the mayor's there, and the fire chief is there. So it was a pretty cool thing to see. And somewhere along the way, I saw a couple live auctions, but then sometimes they didn't hire an auctioneer, and I was the MC and the auctioneer as well. And I did this for my daughter's 14 now, so I did that, we'll say, off and on as a benefit auctioneer, maybe only 3 or 4 times a year for about 10 years. But I always knew in the back of my mind that I could really lean into this if I wanted to. And I met a couple auctioneers along the way at some of these events that told me I've got what it takes to be a great benefit auctioneer. Now, moving to Nashville from Los Angeles was key because Tennessee is a licensed auctioneer state. California is not. So I didn't even know that any states required a license. But when I was in Tennessee, I realized that Tennessee did. So that opened my eyes to a lot. And I always take the approach that, I always say the phrase wrong, though. All ships rise with the tide, or however the phrase goes. Mm-hmm. I'm always trying to be friendly with who I think are the top people in the game. And, and that connected me with Jay Cash, and that connected me with Shane out here in the Nashville area. And I was admiring Trey from afar, and these benefit auction, juggernauts, and became friends with them. And Jay said, "Oh, go to auction school, Nashville Auction School with Shane and with Jason." So that's what I did, and met Daniel there as well. So right away I was like, oh man, yes, I'm learning a skill, but almost more importantly, I'm meeting the people. So met Daniel there because he was an instructor at Nashville Auction School, joined the NAA, and went to, I think, just one of their conference shows. That one was in San Diego, actually, a couple of years ago, and met a bunch of people there, and found another mentor. That was Letitia Fry, who was a big-time benefit auctioneer. So met her there. And then I took the next level class, and I didn't belong in this class because I was not a good bid caller, but I just took advanced bid calling because Trey and Morgan were teaching it, and I wanted to be in the room with them. So I took the advanced bid calling through Nashville Auction School. So got to really work out with some much more talented chant and auctioneering folks than myself. But I'm happy to be the dumbest person in the room, in any room, so I could just kind of learn and get better and better and better. So then I was suddenly kind of working with all those people that I was looking up to, and a couple of referrals started coming in, and I maintained friendships with obviously all the folks that I mentioned, and I think I prospect really hard and find a lot of events, but now a couple of years in, some more are starting to come to me, and the referrals are starting to come to me. But I do think it's key now, like in my previous career where I was the warm-up guy and there were only like 8 of us in Los Angeles that did it. I try to keep, try to be friendly with everyone. I don't think there's competition. I think I'm very different than other guys, and other guys have tremendous skill sets that I don't have. So there's the right person for each one, and never want to jump on someone else's work, but thrilled to get the call for a new opportunity. And yeah, love doing it. Doing big benefits all around the country. And one of my favorites is right there in Lebanon, Tennessee at the Tristar Auction Yard, because that's an easy drive for me.
Yeah, for sure. Well, so both of you mentioned going to auction school. Tom, you went to Nashville Auction School, and Jeff went to Missouri Auction School. I want you to take just a minute, both of you, to tell me about your auction school experience. What was it that you learned that you still, pull out of today, and it's something that's just constantly important to you? What are some things that you would have changed if you would have changed anything? If you were going back to teach a class, what would you tell the students there? So Jeff, we'll start with you on that.
I guess one of the things that, overall, I had a great experience at auction school. One of the instructors that I had there was an auctioneer from most everything I did started out from a livestock angle, because that's my background. That's how I grew up. So the idols, or the guys that I looked up to, were naturally in the livestock realm. Now I wound up working with a lot of those guys outside of that, but one of the guys who was an instructor at auction school was a guy named Stanley Stout. And I really wish there were more recordings of Stanley so that people could see just how good he was. He was a master at his craft. Now, there were several other guys there that were really, really good. I had gotten a little home study course way back when, before I went to auction school. And I had noodled around with that. So I kind of sounded okay compared to most everybody else that was in the room. So one of the guys that I had at auction school this guy's name was Dick Ireland. And I'd had a home study course that I had messed around with when I was a kid. So I had some of the filler words and all that stuff. And Dick Ireland got me up in front of the class. Compared to most everybody else, I sounded okay. But Dick starts bidding really fast. And by the time that he gets done bidding, I'm all tongue-tied. I mean, almost speechless. And he looks at me and goes, you got way too many filler words. Go sit down. So that's one of the memories that sticks out. It really was embarrassing for me, but he just needed to make a little bit of an example out of me, because I guess maybe I thought I was better than I really was. But I guess one of the main things that, in my opinion, I can't answer this for everybody else's auction school because I haven't done those schools, is before getting into the chant, I think that it is so important to be taught. I heard a vocal coach say that singers are vocal athletes. Well, if singers are vocal athletes, then auctioneers we're in the Olympics, in my opinion. If you've done, take this Tristar auction, we've talked about Tristar. Even though we do breaks and all that, doing a 6-hour auction, whether you're announcing, I've been on the announcing end a lot, whether you're announcing or selling, physically it can be very demanding. My opinion is on the school that I went to, they could have spent much more time talking about the importance of breathing, how to breathe, giving you breathing exercises and vocal exercises to train up and to take care of your voice. For a live auctioneer, that's it. If you lose your voice and you lose your wind, you're done. Even if your voice is okay, you don't have your breathing down right, you're toast.
Yeah, absolutely. I had a similar thing happen to me, Jeff, when I was going to auction school. We had to get up and recite Betty Botter, and we had to do it perfectly without getting tongue-tied in order to graduate. So it was just a fun little, thing, fun little trial that we had to do. And I got up the first time thinking, well, I've been raised, in the auction business. I've been behind the microphone forever, and Betty Botter was my nursery rhyme. Like, I've got this. And I got up and went, and I didn't get tongue tied, but Wendell Hanson looked at me and he said, "You are too fast. You're going to really mess yourself up. So go back and slow it down." And one of the best pieces of advice I've ever gotten, and when I teach bid calling, this is what I make the guys do, is you don't recite, you sing. You throw some rhythm into those tongue twisters and throw some rhythm into your number brackets and things like that. So yeah, that's really good, Jeff. We'll come back to the breathing exercises and voice exercise in just a minute. Tom, what about you for auction school? Because I mean, when did you go to auction school? It's got to be recent if Shane and JD were in charge.
Yeah, it was I was actually, it was right after they purchased Nashville Auction School. And it was must have been 22, and it was virtual. So that worked for me. So I was actually in Los Angeles doing Nashville Auction School because it was all on Zoom. And then, yes, and then yeah, so that I'm just kind of sorry, I'm just kind of re-racking the timing in my mind, but that was in 2022, and it was great. It was great because there was such a there were realtors in that class. There were people that want to be cattle auctioneers. There were second generation, third generation, and then there was me, kind of like this anomaly. So kind of made some good friends in there as well. The thing I would say that I learned, but also I would pass on, is I was interesting because I was coming from a great career which paid me good money. So some people might have held out after that and be like, I'm not going to do anything until someone else offers me a job where I'm going to make $200,000 a year. But I was the opposite. I was like, I'm going to, claw and scratch and grind and figure this out. And one of the things I learned was go work for free. So I was in Los Angeles working for a great show during the week, but then I would come back and, be a ring man for someone like Jay Cash at a I didn't even know what a real estate auction was, but I was just doing whatever was needed for I didn't deserve much money because I wasn't skilled at it, right? So I was just kind of doing whatever I needed. And the first couple of times I didn't even want money from them. I was like, let me just volunteer, let me just figure this stuff out a little bit. So go work for free would be my thought to people. Like, just get in the right room with the right people and work for free. It doesn't matter, because that's going to start setting you on the right path and meeting the right people. And then while you're doing that, and that goes back to the no ego thing, there's no ego with this, especially in your early days. Just work hard, work for free. My path was pretty clear in my mind. It was a very specific path. I knew it was benefit auctions for me. So perhaps another piece of advice for newer folks is try to figure out that path. Maybe try to not do everything at once, although I guess a lot of folks might have to, right? And I understand that as well. But you look at like Amazon. Amazon became huge. They only sold books, and they got so good at selling books, and they were the best in the world at selling books. And then maybe they started selling some household supplies, and they kind of expanded from there, and look at them now. So I feel like a lot of folks try to do everything right away. They'll look at some superstars in our industry that are doing everything, but that's really hard to excel at all those things. So think about your path, focus on your path.
Yeah, I think that's right. You mentioned work for free. I'm too had known Daniel for a long time, but I met him, I guess, at Nashville Auction School as he was teaching a class there. And he came up to me. He said, "Hey, we're looking to have a relief auctioneer come and help Jeff. Would you be interested?" And I said, "Daniel, I've never sold heavy equipment. Like I might sell a tractor or two at a state sale, but I've never sold a drum roller or a excavator. Like I don't know how to do that." And he said, "Well, do one sale with us and you'll learn." And I said, "Well, look, man, I'm happy to come if you'll have me, but let me work for you the first sale for free. You're paying me an experience." And Daniel and Nicole were kind enough to give me some money for the day, but I really think that what Tom said about if you're trying to get in the business, you get paid an experience, and that experience will get you money eventually, right? But take the time to put in the work and learn for sure. Tom, I want to ask you one more thing about your school experience, and that is you did it virtually, and COVID kind of prompted that for a lot of schools, not just auction school, but for a lot of schools. How was that experience? How was it doing school virtually?
It was good for me just because I wouldn't have been able to, it would have taken me I wouldn't have been able to do it till 6 months later when we actually lived in Nashville if I wasn't able to do it virtually. So I was very thankful for that. Now I have been able to stop by Nashville Auction School a couple times at the in-person one, so I would highly recommend that, and when possible. And I'm not even certain if certain schools are doing virtual anymore. But for me, it was good for the time and where I was at. And I'm very self-motivated. So I can work very, very successfully from home really hard and send out 50 prospecting emails and then go have lunch. So I'm okay with that setup. But of course, I think I would recommend, in person so you can truly learn from all the people in the room.
Yeah, so Nashville Auction School still does virtual, but if you do virtual, you don't get the bid calling practice. So there are certain licensure things that might require you to have the bid calling practice. Like if you're getting licensed in Tennessee, I think you have to have the bid calling practice. Now, I may be wrong about that. You have to check with Shane or Jason or someone who knows more than me, which isn't too hard to find. Now,
I think
Missouri Auction School also does virtual. So
I
there's
think
another option.
and speaking on Tennessee specifically, so correct. I did not have the bid calling experience as part of that, but I believe I have the hours mixed up, but I think you only need 50 hours instead of 80 hours to get licensed in Tennessee. And those additional 30 hours might be the bid calling, but
That's right.
I'm
Yep, I think
not
you're
the
right about
expert
that.
on any of
Yeah,
this.
yeah. Again, check with your school and your state to figure out what you need for licensure. Okay, Jeff, I want to go back to you. You mentioned music earlier and voice exercise, vocal exercises, breathing, things like that. You're a musician, so I'm curious, how has your experience in music transitioned with your experience in auctioneering? How's that helped you?
Uh, that's a really good question, by the way. Well, I guess one of the things that the musicianship has done has lent itself is not just on the vocals, but is engaging the audience and building. You've got to hit them right out of the chute and be able to get their attention. If you don't have their attention, then you can't make the transactions work, right?
Right.
So pace for me is very important. On the one of the things that the auction business taught me back when I was trying to do the music thing and all of that stuff is that I looked at one of the I looked at one of the videos that I had some guys that I was doing a concert for, and the auction thing made me realize that I wasn't keeping the pace and momentum up in the concert that I was doing. So it totally changed the next time I did a concert on what I did. And a guy named Danny Booth was a drummer who's played for tons of people now. And the first rehearsal, when I went back after I'd looked at that, I said, okay, Danny, you're going to be working the whole time. I said, as soon as we get done with one, you're going to be playing even when I'm talking over. Kind of leads back to what we were talking about with Tom and the announcing. That it's so important to keep the pace going. Vocal exercises is a big deal, and the melody, the rhythm that goes into the auction chant, it's huge. At certain times, I don't do much singing out anymore, but I do in church and whatnot. And I have found that singing, when you're doing your auctioneering, the range on notes that you use is very narrow. Right. The dynamics like that you have when you're singing, where you're going down from a really low note all the way up to a high note, is not there. So in that narrow range of notes that you're using, I do think that it's important to bounce back and forth and not stay on one note or one tone for very long, and as much as you can to raise those up. And it's kind of like guitar playing. There's a little bit to be said for that in the auctioneering thing too. They say that it's the notes that you don't play that makes the difference. And I think that it's the things that we can say at the right time. It's slowing down at the right time. It's picking things up at the right time that help to keep it engaging and not so monotonous when you're listening to someone.
Yeah. I think that's really good advice there. All right, guys, I want to ask you one more question, then we'll get to rapid fire questions. I know y'all are busy and you've got to go, so I want to make sure to respect your time. But both of you have something in common with your careers, whether it be narrating, auctioneering, TV, whatever, and that is you guys travel a lot. Y'all are on planes all the time. And I had Blake McDaniel on for about a year ago, and I was asking him, he was on a plane. He would fly from Mississippi to Oklahoma to North Carolina, I believe, and then back to Mississippi. And I mean, he was on a plane just about every day going to different car sales. You guys are on planes all the time. I want to ask both of you your advice about traveling. How do you keep your ducks in a row? Is there something that you do to make sure that especially your vocal health is good on an airplane? You got any tips, tricks, anything like that? Or how do you stay energized? Because traveling wears you out too. So I'll start with Jeff, because Jeff is, I guess, either about to drive or get on a plane.
Yeah, I try to drive as much as I can. The whole and I'm sure that Tom would agree with this. The jet setting life appears glamorous. It's not very glamorous. And if it's within driving distance anymore, and I can get there in a reasonable amount of time, I'm going to drive, because you just get constricted when you're on a plane. When you're going back to back on that, especially this time of year when weather is such a challenge, you kind of got to make sure you've got a plan B. If it's another airline, or if it's like it was back in April, I was doing an equipment auction. I had done an auction in Florida on Thursday. I couldn't get a flight out that night. I had a 5:30 flight to fly into New Orleans. I pulled in like 15 minutes before the auction started on Friday. And then I had to fly out that night to go to Nashville to drive to Lexington for an auction the next day. Well, I've kind of been a victim of the whole weather thing. So it was my Delta flight that got backed up from New Orleans to Atlanta that put me a bind that was going to make me miss my connection from Atlanta to Nashville. And thankfully, they had a delayed Southwest flight that was going directly into Nashville that got me back. And we wound up spending the night, I think, in Mammoth Cave or something like that. I was in the bed in Mammoth Cave before my flight. My original flight was even supposed to land in Nashville. So it's a great thing to be busy. And at certain times we are busy. Now, it's not like that all the time. But I just think you really have to pay attention and say, if this happens, then what? Right. Because the big thing is I have been very, very fortunate. I have only missed one auction because of flights and delayed flights that I couldn't get there. And that was for a charity auction that was in Oregon last August. It was the first time that I had missed one. And ironically enough, I couldn't get there. And then a wind and rainstorm came right before the auction, blew all the glassware and everything down in the tents and all that. And they wound up having to cancel the whole sale anyway.
Oh, man.
Well,
yeah, I mean,
yeah.
it's Murphy's Law. What's going to go wrong?
It's going to get
sure.
you. It's going to happen. But I had a good run before it did.
Yeah. Tom, what about you?
Yeah. I think Jeff hit a bunch of them. One that I think he would agree on, but he missed is never check a bag. Make sure you have everything in your carry-on, your jacket, whatever you're wearing. Because if you check a bag, it's game over. It's gonna go south real fast. So never check a bag. I'm lucky that I live near an airport. That was one of the reasons we moved to where we live in the Nashville area. We live in Mount Juliet, and about 15 minutes to the Nashville airport. I try to fly Delta often because then I can go to the Delta Sky Club where it's relaxing. You walk in there and it takes the load off. So if I can get on a Delta flight and be in the Delta Sky Club, it's just not stressful. You're out of the busyness of the airport and, you got your food and drink and everything you need there to truly focus. I work mostly at night. So that might be a little different than a lot of things Jeff is flying for. So I have to make sure. So I'm pretty comfortable with the earliest flight out, even if my event's not till 5 p.m., which it always is, not until 5 p.m. I want to be on a 7 a.m. flight or 6 a.m. flight just to get to that city, or if possible, the night before, just to get there because I don't want any stress in my day. One of my main ways of living life is like whatever I can do to erase anything stressful so I could just be in the moment and be myself and be effective. That's what I try to do. So there's a couple of tips that hopefully will help. Oh, and if you have to take a layover, hopefully in a city that's drivable to your destination in worst case scenario. So if I'm trying to get to Seattle, or it's a bad example, but if I'm trying to get to San Diego, I want to lay over in Los Angeles. I don't want to lay over in Houston. So my layover in Los Angeles, everything goes south. I could jump in a car and get down there.
Right. Yeah, that's great advice. All right, guys, we're getting close to out of time. So I always end these podcasts with rapid fire questions. These are one word or one sentence things. If you want to talk a little longer, by all means, go ahead. Y'all are the guest. But I'll ask this question. It'll be directed to both of you. And if I have a difference in the question for one of you, I'll let you know. Okay. So the first question is, what's the weirdest item you've ever sold at auction? Jeff?
A Popeye birdstone.
I don't even know what that is.
It brought $58,000.
Wow.
Popeye Birdstone. It was a little one of those almost. It was a an Indian artifact thing
Okay.
that the little ducks like your grandmother would have in her
Yeah.
cabinet,
Yeah.
made out of stone, and it would fit in your pocket. 58,000 is what it brought. Plus the buyer's premium.
Wow. Tom?
We had a good bottle of bourbon, but there was also a baby stroller that was left over from the silent auction that nobody bid on. So I'm always one for fun. So I put the bourbon in the baby stroller. And the amount of fun, when it's presented in that way, the amount of fun that can bring to the room is transformative. So had a whole lot of fun selling bourbon in the baby stroller.
Yeah. Awesome. Tom, what is your favorite filler word to use in an auction chant?
I'm working on bit 'em up, bit 'em up, bit 'em up because I like doing bit 'em up, bit 'em up, bit 'em up, up, up. And then also my kids like when I do Super Mario Brothers, bit 'em up, 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 bit 'em up, 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 bit 'em up, up, up. And when you go underwater, bitter, 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 bitter. So I'm digging the bees.
That's good. Jeff?
Are you able to buy them? I guess.
Good. Good. Okay.
True. Yeah.
One final question for you guys, and we'll call it a day. I'm going to differ the question here for both of you. So I'm going to start with Jeff. Jeff, what's one piece of advice that you would give to a recent graduate of an auction school who wants to be a live bid caller? I know that's an open-ended question, but what's one piece of advice that you would give that person?
I had a guy who was my sponsoring auctioneer when I started. He was a great guy. He was the nicest man. He was not a very good. He was not a very good bid caller. Okay. My advice would be to be patient and find someone that you can learn from. That might take you a little bit of time to do that, but I just think that it's so important starting out. It probably would have saved me some years if I had been patient a few more months in finding the right person to help me.
Yeah. Yeah. So seek out good help and don't be afraid to ask either. Tom, different question, similar question, but different, because I think you work predominantly, at least in my knowledge of you, with narrating. So we try to encourage our listeners who are mostly new auctioneers that there's other things in the auction business that you can be really good at and be really involved with outside of bid calling. So I want you to take a spin on this and say, what's one piece of advice you would give to someone who might want a career as a narrator or an announcer or a
Sure.
benefit hype man? What would you tell them?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. I mean, probably similar to what I said before. It is you were there to you're there to learn. I'm fully accepting of the position of the second most important man on that stage when that is the case, because I'm learning so much from that person next to me. So it goes back to having no ego and just whether you're making your craft better minute by minute while listening to that other person. Just be happy to be a part of the team, proud to be part of the room. I got invited to a Christmas party last year with the Tristar team. I told Daniel and Nicole it was my first Christmas party since the Ellen show used to have. There were 300 people there. We had dancers. We had, it was chaotic. At the Tristar team, we had a ping pong table, but that was enough. So happy to be a part of the team and hang out. But I will say, I want to piggyback on what Jeff said. Finding that right person to work underneath. So Jay Cash was that person for me, and I know there's a lot of people in the industry like this, but he was truly cheering on my success, and he wanted me to get better and better and better. And so find someone that is not scared of your potential, but supportive of your dreams.
I love that. That's great advice. And that's a good one to end on. So, guys, thank y'all for joining me today. I appreciate your time. I look forward to Jeff to seeing you on the 19th, and Tom, Lord willing, seeing you at either the next one or the one after that. I don't know what the schedule is going to be because you'll be on tour for a few months, but we're praying for you and your success, Jeff. We'll look forward to seeing you on the 19th. And with that, guys, we'll call it a day. Thanks for being on. And to our listeners, keep listening. We have these every month, and got some great guys lined up to be on with me. So thanks for your continued support, guys. We'll see you later. You've been listening to the Better Bid Calling podcast. If you would like to sponsor an episode, please contact us at betterbidcalling@gmail.com.